Now, I would love to focus on a little bit more on Creek Partners. So, the fund that you've talked about, the Creek Partners India Growth Opportunities Fund, which has a $3 to $5 million target initially, which is focused on Fireside Ventures. Can you tell us about this approach and why this particular entry point?
It's a good question, and I'll probably have to take a step back in terms of how we are constructing our portfolio, Creek Partners' portfolio. Because we almost act like a fund of funds. So effectively, I mean, this is a feeder fund into Fireside, but what we're trying to do is create a portfolio of venture capital firms, secure co-investment rights so that we can participate directly in the best performing portfolio companies when those VC firms want to acquire their pro rata rights. So that's kind of at the top level. So we said, all right, what's the best portfolio construction in this scenario? So we broke it down into two parts. One is innovation that's targeted towards India, so India for India. The second bucket is India for the world. So where the solutions or the value that these portfolio companies generate is more easily portable across geography. So it could be technology, space tech, that sort of space. So these are the two large buckets. And it just naturally happened that we were focusing on the consumer sector because it's a differentiated value add in an investor's portfolio over here, because that's something that that is very unique to India. The success is predicated on being able to identify winning brands, and the consumption is fueling that. So we were fairly confident that the consumption is going to sort of lift over the next couple of years. And so that's how we constructed our portfolio. In Indian VC firms, we like sector specialists and thematic VC firms. We generally don't like to work too closely with agnostic firms. And that's just because our belief is that venture, unlike other asset classes, is very niche. You can't have scale in a venture fund. You can't raise a $1 billion, I mean, I suppose you could, but scale is always going to be a constraint because you're working with the founder, you're trying to do your product market fit, then add value along the journey of the company. So all of these things add to it. So when we looked at India for India, we said, what are the different themes that could play out? So we focused on consumer, then there was an ag tech sector as well that we're evaluating. So it just happened in terms of timing and capital raise that of the firms that we were evaluating, Fireside was raising at this point in time. And it also happened that we completed our analysis. We started with 8 venture capital firms and then went down to 4. And then, did deep due diligence on 2 venture capital firms and then landed on Fireside Ventures. So it was deliberate to say that let's start with this and then we can look to expand, because we thought it was a differentiated opportunity in an investor's portfolio over here in Australia.
Yeah, very well said. So one aspect that actually got my attention with your co-investment strategy was the focus on IPO-bound companies. So how does this approach actually benefit Australian investors compared to traditional fund investments?
So in venture capital, one of the risks you face is liquidity. Globally, if you see venture capital firms, I think the trend that we're seeing is that the fund tenures are being extended. You have continuation funds, special purpose vehicles, and the fact is that large venture capital firms are trying hard to create liquidity for their limited partners. What we feel is that in order to mitigate the risk of illiquidity, we first want to be able to choose the best performing companies, which are handpicked by the best performing venture capital firms. So in a sense, they've got product market fit, they've got strong traction, and what's more is they have an ecosystem of venture capital firms or limited partners who are deeply invested in their success. In other words, they're going to be well capitalized, and that's very crucial for venture portfolio companies, startups, as they go through their journey. So why we feel that the IPO-bound companies make the most amount of sense is twofold. The liquidity risk is mitigated, and the capitalization risk is also mitigated. Right. So once it is IPO bound and we feel that it's on that trajectory, we feel more confident that we can return that capital or hold on to it, just depending on how much value is left to be made on the companies. So we think that those are some of the reasons why we want to approach it. The other thing, and I wanted to raise just in terms of IPO bound, is when we do our evaluation of venture capital firms in India, and we compare the DPI, so the distribution to paid in capital, against global peers and even Australian venture capital firms, we find that they return capital within 4 to 5 years. So 1x of your investment is aimed for, they aim to return that within 4 to 5 years. And that's in stark contrast compared to global peers, right? So that's why we feel choosing the strongest VC firm who have a deliberate strategy around distribution, who then have these companies, so they're deliberately thinking about how to move them along their fundraising journey, and then being able to participate in those companies will really give us a quality access, and then they're IPO bound, so we have the ability to then sort of liquidate at the right time and not have to worry about secondaries or other kind of options, M&A, strategic buyouts, as ways to generate liquidity for our investors.
Absolutely. Wow, that makes complete sense. Now I'm going to take you back to the future again. So looking ahead to 2030, what would you consider is success for Creek Partners and for the Australian-Indian investment connection more broadly?
Wow, I hadn't really thought of that, but I think when we started out, we wanted to build a bridge.
Yeah.
So if I were to break that down two ways, one is Australia into India. A few things. We want to be in a position where we have invested into 10 or 12 VC firms. We want to have that already set up. Second is we definitely want to be raising from some of the pension funds, and at which point that would be, the exercising our co-investment rights, being in a position to sort of executing on that strategy. So that's from Australia to India. So if we're able to do that, I think we will be very happy. And the second aspect, which I think is very crucial as well, is how much collaboration can we foster from India to Australia. So is there Indian capital that wants to acquire Australian companies or technology? And I'll expand on that with an example. So last week we were talking to a dairy manufacturer, so milk products, buttermilk, yogurt, ice cream. So that's their sort of wheelhouse. And we were, speaking to him as part of our due diligence with Fireside Ventures, and we said, look, we don't want this to be just capital being deployed. Is there anything in Australia that can add value to your business? And immediately he said, look, Australia has some of the best technology for dairy manufacturing, and he gave me a really nice example, which I don't know, Indian viewers might be able to appreciate. In India, if you go and buy milk, and you take it home, the first thing you do is boil it, no matter how much it has been pasteurized or purified.
True.
It does not matter. You buy milk, you have to go home and you boil it to purify it. Whereas over here, you go to Woolies or Coles or wherever and you buy milk, you can just open it and start consuming straight off the bottle. So he said, look, that's a clear indication of where Australia is. So if you're able to connect us to that technology and import that across, we're happy to buy it or partner with Australian Dairy Manufacturers Association. We would love something like that. So like that, we're seeing so many examples of entrepreneurs, and I can give more, but in the interest of time, I'll just stop with that. So we've seen lots of entrepreneurs who say, look, we've got this supply chain forecasting tool, which I think has great applicability to the mining sector, because we're using APIs to collect weather patterns, we're using train routes to optimize, delivery schedules and things of that nature. So he said we'd love to kind of showcase some of these products to the likes of Rio Tinto or Woodside or wherever. So to then close the last part of that answer, if there's a strong collaboration between India into Australia, I think that would also be a mark of success for us by 2030.
Absolutely. Well, very well said. I could definitely relate with the example that you shared, because that's a difference that I feel. Like it's as simple as that, just like milk, you have to boil it, and it's an everyday thing. It's become an everyday thing in the households in India, but it would bring such a change. I mean, that's wonderful. I'm sure that our audience members will be able to relate. Now, Akshay, we can't wrap up this interview without talking about your team. So, the incredible team behind Creek Partners that have helped you grow just from where you are today. It would be great if you could, tell us about your team.
Yeah, my partner Chirag and I, so we're the founders, but we do have our advisors as well. Members of the Sydney Angels community, other veterans, in the superannuation sector who are advising us. And this, like I said, this is not something, we're not trying to be, investment manager of the year or win awards of that nature. I think ours is a bit broader. We want to create a connection between Australia and India, and that's really the motivating factor, right? Like, why do anything at all? So we're truly very fortunate and grateful that both Chirag and I, we've met so many wonderful people along the way, and in our professional careers, and we've asked them to come and guide us. A lot of our advisors join our GP calls with the VC firms when we speak to other LPs who are investing into a Fireside or whoever, and then we take that back and have a consultation. So that wisdom and guidance that we're receiving from our advisors is something that's really special, and that makes us confident that we are going about it the right way, right? So because of we understand the Australian financial system really well. We've got our AFS license and things of that nature, but we haven't grown up over here. We're immigrants at the end of the day. Some of our advisors have been in the VC ecosystem since 1980s, and that wisdom and experience you can't just get that. You just have to have lived through that and share that wisdom with us. So yeah, we're very grateful to our advisors who help us along the way and who are continuing to help us make the right decision.
Amazing. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing your wonderful insights on Creek Partners and the broader India growth story that I know we all will be looking out for. To our viewers watching this interview, I hope you found this conversation as insightful and wonderfully interesting as I did. So if you want to get in touch with the team at Creek Partners, please see the details at the side of the screen and in the description of this video. Once again, thank you, Akshay, for being here with us.
Thank you, Rhythm, for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you.